The
Would you be
cloud.
kind enough- Would you be kind enough to do the intros, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we can, I can call names and you can just introduce yourself if that would be all right, just so everyone, I mean, we
Sure.
mostly have all been in meetings together at this point, but I'll do that anyway. So Ravi, why don't you start, introduce yourself?
Okay, I'm from Seabrook. I've been on the RPC, what 3-4 months now,
Yes.
and I succeeded Mike Rubidoux, who was the RPC Commissioner for Seabrook before me, and he has since moved off from Seabrook to another town. And here in Seabrook, I'm also on the Planning Board Budget Committee and also in the Winnacunnet School Budget Committee. So I'm here to learn. I'm here to find out, how we work together between the RPC and the town planning board for mutual benefit.
Great. And Beth.
Hi, I'm Beth Moreau. I've been on the Portsmouth City of Portsmouth Planning Board for the last 9 years. I've been part of RPC since January 2020. And yeah, I do a few other things.
And Barbara.
Barbara,
Are you calling me? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I'm Barbara Kravitz, and I have been with RPC for a long time, serving, among other things, as a past chair, and I'm really excited at this format because I think this is a terrific way to bring people in to interact. So thanks, Tim.
Yes, great. Richard, we all know who you are.
okay.
Introduce yourself, come on.
You still want me to say something?
Absolutely.
I've been with the Rockingham Planning Commission for 14 years, maybe 15 years. I was selectman for 9 years in Hampton Falls. Planning board, zoning board. I started out the zoning board, actually, on the planning board. And I've been with the Rockingham Planning Commission in whatever endeavor they want me to be in.
And Dennis.
Yeah, Newington Planning Board, been on the planning board for, I don't know, 25 years, I think. Member of the RPC for quite a while, but really getting active more recently. And really you can see the value of the RPC very clearly, and I appreciate that we have you here.
And Jim, you're our newest to-be commissioner. You're so new, you're not even a commissioner yet. You're muted though, too. Oh.
You are muted, Jim.
Jim,
Sorry,
Yeah.
I should know better. I haven't been Zooming lately. That's my excuse. Jim Cerny from Newcastle. I'll be replacing Mike McAndrew, whose term ends in June. I like data, I like maps, and I'm looking forward particularly to digesting the 2020 census data, which I am not quite sure whether that level of detail for Newcastle it's out. And let me throw you out a provocative little factoid. Today, I realized that the state of New Hampshire, as it's in the process this month of setting town tax rates, nobody's going to feel sorry for Newcastle because our tax rate is $4.78.
you're off the commission.
Hey, okay. On that note, Tricia.
Not fair, not fair.
Hi, Tricia Briggio from Raymond, New Hampshire. Just started. I'm on the planning board in Raymond. I'm on the CIP. I'm on Conscom. And I look forward to catching up and getting a lot of information from the group.
Brilliant. And Valerie.
Hi, I'm Valerie Gamache. I'm in Northampton. I got elected to the planning board this year. I was an alternate for 2 years. I've been in this area for 4 years. I grew up in New Hampshire, but moved away for 35 years to DC area. So I'm on the long range planning, land use planning subcommittee. We're working on a revision to the master plan. And so I'm happy to be here.
And Peter Britz is here from Portsmouth. You want to introduce yourself, Peter?
Yeah, sorry.
That's all right.
things at once. Peter Britz, I'm the environmental planner and interim planning director for the city of Portsmouth, and I guess an ex officio member to the commission.
Peter's been around quite a while with us in various capacities, helping out. So it's glad you could make it. And Leanne, you just popped in. You're still connecting to audio, it looks like, but we'll see if you get connected here.
You know, as she is connecting, I just wanted to make this one comment that the tax rate in the towns is just a ratio of the town budget to the total asset value in the town, and the town budget could still be going up. And with the way the real estate values have appreciated, everybody is getting a windfall in terms of the tax rate. That doesn't mean the town budget is going down. And you know that in Rye also the tax rates are very low, like like 8 or 9% or something like that. But that that doesn't mean that budgets are ever going down. It's just that the real estate values are going up.
Yeah. And Leanne, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself?
Leanne,
Maybe not.
she's.
I know Leanne's from Fremont and relatively, oh, there she is.
Yes, she did.
Hi,
I just wanted you to introduce yourself so we get everyone. You're the last one, so.
oh, sorry, and I'm sorry I'm late. I was at another meeting. I'm Leanne Miner from Fremont. I'm on the Conservation Commission and Planning Board and work in the Land Use Office, and happy to be here as a new commissioner.
And Dave Walker is here, Assistant Director from RPC, helping out. What I'm going to do is I get 2 slide decks. One is a presentation that I gave a couple times now with Nate Miller from Southern New Hampshire Planning called the ABCs of the RPCs. I'm doing sort of an abbreviated version of that, but it gives you a really good history of how we came to be. So I was going to start with that. I don't mind questions along the way. I'm kind of counting on Dave in case I'm sharing my screen and don't see a hand or something go up, that if he sees it, just to cut in for me here. And then we'll take a little bit of a deeper dive into the RPC side and some more specifics about us and what we're trying to do and what we're hoping you can do as commissioners. And then we can just talk about, questions you have or anything else that comes up in the next, hour or so. And hopefully we can keep it to about an hour. I should be able to get it done in less than that with questions and everything. So I will dive in if there's no other questions and just share my screen here.
Tim, I don't want them to be held to an hour if they need to go farther.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We can do whatever you got to do. I just definitely want to be respectful too of everyone's time here. So I'm going to share this and then you that. And then you should be able to see that presentation pretty clearly there, right?
Yep.
We got it.
All right, so this, I can't take credit for this. I helped with it and I've presented with Nate Miller at Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission a couple times using this slide deck, but he's definitely the brainchild. So all credit goes to Nate for the very well done, concise way that he digested how we came to be. So let's get into that a little bit here. My computer doesn't freeze there. Okay, so about 1969, so is that roughly 52 years ago, it was Governor King, John King at the time, that had that vision that regional planning was a good idea and that having communities, giving the communities the opportunity to work collaboratively would help with the state's future overall. So what he did was put together a committee on regional planning. And that committee, looked at the needs of coordinated access to federal grants. It's one of the big things that we do is use some of the local money to leverage federal dollars. That was one of the original ideas behind this. I think they have the vision that, hey, we're missing out. We can leverage our collaborative efforts and resources to bring in additional federal money. It was building community services and the regional relationships that you need, for those issues that transcend community boundaries. And then, the overall idea of regional planning for supporting the community planning and bringing a regional plan to the master plan, sort of that collaboration that was sort of the vision for this. So this group met back in the 60s in March of 1969. They used the University of New Hampshire to do a delineation study to help determine what the boundaries should be. We still talk about the boundaries today. We're having 9 regional planning commissions in the state, but the way this came about was looking at various groupings, regional groupings. The example that we have on the slide here is tourism or shared functions between municipalities. Could be any of the shared services that might have been out there. Urban activity, like, you know, you think of like Dover, Rochester, Somersworth as a potential area where there's 3 cities that are very close to sort of a tri-city area. They looked at that type of relationship between the communities, and they looked at the potential for growth in regional growth centers. And, you know, this map over here, there's sort of just a guide as to all these different pieces that they looked at. But this is kind of the shocker in the next slide. There were originally 17 regions identified in the state as potential growth areas and regions that could work collaboratively. And you can see, if you look in the bottom right-hand corner of the state map there, regions 15 and 16 were the more or less the Rockingham RPC. And we've gone through a number of shifts in over time. I think at one point we had some of Stratford mixed in with us, and we've evolved to what we are today. But you can see how right now the top half of the state, 1 through 5, is actually the North Country Council. And then 6 and 7 is what we now know as Lakes Region. 8 and 9 are the Upper Valley region. 10 and 11 is Southwest, and then Southern is region 13, and that Southern and Central 12 and 13 actually sort of stayed the same. Nashua stayed the same, and we were combined, and then Stratford more or less stayed the same. But you can see there was quite a bit of changing over the years.
Tim?
Yeah, Richard.
What is the differentiation between the single dots, triple dots, double dots? Is that anything to do with our conversation?
The single red dots are just the growth centers that were identified by that committee, the governor's committee. So there's I can't really see. I'm kind of looking a little closely here. I see looks like Portsmouth has a dot. Might even be like it's probably Salem or Plastow that has it. Probably Salem, Manchester, Concord. And then in 17, you see the 3 dots up in 17. That's the 3 cities I mentioned. That's Dover, Rochester, Somersworth. So I think that was
Tri-City area.
Yeah. So each dot is basically one of the growth centers that were identified.
Okay.
So that was in December of 1968 that map was put together. By March of 1969, they had their report published. So they worked pretty quickly on this. It moved right along. And out of that report was, they implemented basically RSA 36, which was in effect by August 29th, 1969. So we went from December of 1968 to August of 1969, we had RSA 36, which is the enabling legislation for the RPCs. It's been revised over the years, and a few things have changed since 1969, but it's largely the same. And the role that we play and the powers and duties as they're described in that RSA for regional planning commissions are largely what they were in 1969. And I'll go through those, just through them just quickly here, so you have a sense of what we're intended to do under the law, under RSA 36. And what we've often say and reiterate to communities is that we're an advisory entity. We provide advisory technical assistance to local planning matters as requested. Any member municipality can ask for our advice, but all the jurisdiction falls on the planning board. We don't have any regulatory control or jurisdiction over any aspect of the local land use or development review process. I think that's pretty clear across most of the communities now. There were times, and it'll probably happen again as select boards and planning boards turn over. They don't necessarily know this. They don't necessarily understand it. And that's why our messaging has to be continuous on this, is that we're here in an advisory role to work with you and provide you with guidance on an as needed basis. And the trick is that I need the communities to ask sometimes, because we can't be everywhere at once and we don't always know what the needs are. So getting that communication going back and forth is going to be a theme of tonight's discussion. There are a couple things that we're required to do under RSA 36, the largest of which is to prepare a comprehensive regional master plan. The law says it should be updated every 5 years, if not sooner. Our last one was updated and completed in 2015. The rub here is that we are not funded to do this by the state. It's in the state law that says it shall be updated, but there is no direct funding source to update the regional master plan. So we tend to have to cobble together grants, use some local money that we get out of the dues sources, but that makes it pretty difficult to do a process that's as large as this one that takes, to outreach to 27 communities to address land use, transportation, all the things I have listed here, and then some. So the last time we did this, we were funded through the Housing and Urban Development. It was through a grant. It was back during the Obama administration. There was a HUD grant that we were eligible to apply for. And what happened was all 9 regional planning commissions went after that grant collaboratively. It was actually led by the Nashville Regional Planning Commission. I was working there at the time as the assistant director, and we sort of spearheaded that effort to get that HUD money, and were successful. And we're able to subcontract out to the 9 regional planning commissions so everybody could update the regional master plan using a common framework. And ultimately, I think develop and deliver a good product for each planning commission. Unfortunately, that hasn't been updated since that time. And there is hope on the horizon that, just say on the side that there is the potential for some additional funding in the next 6 to 12 months to do a refresh of the regional plan, again through HUD. And we're still working with folks at HUD to see if we can get some funding to update that. So just stay tuned, and if that happens, we'll definitely be in touch with everybody.
We're not penalized, are we, Tim?
No, prior to that, it was some places it was over a decade since it was updated. I don't think the National Regional Planning Commission had touched their regional master plan in over 10 years prior to that update in 2015. Yeah, Ravi.
Robbie?
Oh, muted.
Robbie.
In the previous slide, that list of, can you go to the previous slide, Tim, if you don't mind, please?
Yep.
Yeah, the list of the different things the regional plan should consider: the land use, transportation, communication, parks and recreation, public facilities, conservation, and regulatory recommendations. Is this list cast in concrete, or is it sort of like an example of things that the RPC helps their local communities with?
Yeah, it's not exhaustive or cast in any type of must do. I mean, we need to do a land use, transportation, those things you need to have. But if you go to our website and you can look at all the chapters that we have, if you go to the tab for regional plan, and you can see all the chapters that we wrote, that we did when we did the update. So it's not cast that way. In fact, we could, I think if we were to do it again, we probably would add a little bit more on coastal resilience, I think, in our next.
Well, our
Um,
emergency
uh,
response in general, and that may have several subsections to it.
Yeah,
And, the flooding and things could be one kind of emergency. And unfortunately, we live in a world of, where now the pandemics, and there is, terrorists, and all these kinds of things are still there. But so there's some sort of a community emergency response, or, things like that. Public infrastructure, like utilities and so forth. I mean, there are lots of different things. You may have thought about all that, but I just wanted to voice that as different things that need to be looked into in a master plan, especially across communities.
yeah. And some of the things you're touching on there go into hazard mitigation planning that we often do through FEMA. And we do that for a number of communities around the region. But those, again, you need your master plan to reference those and tie those other planning documents together. So,
Okay,
thanks.
thanks.
Yeah. So the other piece of legislation in the RSA is our regional housing needs assessment, which we were talking about before we got started. I think we'll be talking about, like I said, for the next 6 to 12 months, but we are required to do this under the law, again, every 5 years or sooner. And it has to include, the issues related to workforce affordable housing. The law says assessment of housing needs for persons and families of all levels of income. So we did this in 2015 as part of our regional master plan update using those HUD funds. We are now fortunate enough to have some funding through the State Office of Planning and Development, Bureau of Economic Affairs, to do a revision and an update to that. Sarah Tartar is our new planner, is leading the charge on that, and you're going to be hearing from her quite a bit in the coming months. So that's funded again. We're going to be moving forward with that, as I said. So some other stuff that's in here. I mean, this is sort of the catch-all, if you will, but it's really about ensuring that the full development and improvement of communities while protecting resources, the preservation of the region's physical and historic resources, environmental resources. We're looking to have responsible development in a way that brings the region in a forward direction. One of the changes, I think this came into the RSA after the fact, but it was, I'm going to let somebody in here. Joe Johnson from Stratum's coming in. The RSA, I think, was amended to add the developments of regional impact. And what this is that, when a planning board runs into a project that is significant, and there's a set of criteria, there's, I think, 5 or 6 criteria for a development that sort of triggers this review of as a development of regional impact. It's looking at, proximity of a development to the neighboring towns. It mentions traffic. It looks at water resources and a number of other areas. But if a planning board designates a proposed development as that of regional impact, really what it does is it gives the RPC, whichever regional planning commission that town is in, the status of an abutter. And what we do as in that role then is we take a look at the proposed development from a higher regional level. We look at the various criteria that set it as a regional impact, and we offer comments from a regional perspective. We have a process that's outlined on our website again that basically lays it out, where we do a hearing or a meeting with the developer and members of the planning board and the public, walk through the proposed development and give our comments to the planning board and in that setting, and then follow it up with a written set of comments. The biggest thing to remember with this is, even though we are in a butter, we have no influence over the decision of the planning board. It's just advisory again. But it gives the planning board a different lens and a different perspective on a project from that regional level.
Hey, Tim, this is
Dennis.
Dennis. Yes, question for you. If the planning board declares a project to be a regional impact, are we supposed to notify you?
Yeah, it's laid out in that RSA, but we're supposed to get I think a certified letter and copies of the plans. But it's all in that RSA 3654 to 58.
Wow, I didn't realize that. I thought I just had to go to the local towns. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, you're supposed to, I think you do that by default by us being given a butter status. So if you had a regional impact, you would, notify Portsmouth, potentially Greenland, and
Right.
I guess in theory Durham, even though they're separated by the bay, and then us as well as the RPC.
Okay, thank you.
All right, a couple other random factoids in here that we rarely use in terms of our powers and duties, but apparently we could have interstate and regional planning compacts. Other than Upper Valley Lake Sunapee having members from Vermont back in the 60s until the 2000s, none of us have ever seen this part of the RSA enacted. So it's there. Apparently we could have, this type of planning compact, but to everybody's knowledge that I've spoken to, it hasn't happened. There may be value. We do collaborate with Southern Maine Planning Commission on a regular basis, as well as the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission in Massachusetts. But right now there's no formal agreement. And then oftentimes, we as planning commissions and commissioners are tagged to be part of state boards and commissions. Offshore wind is a current one. The Seacoast Commission on Drinking Water is another. When this slide was done, it wasn't, the National Regional Planning and Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission were part of the New Hampshire Rail Transit Authority, which has now been, I think, changed to another purpose, but they were focused on getting rail service from Lowell to Nashua, Manchester, and Concord. But those are the types of things that we're asked to do. We can also apparently recommend the formation of regional transit districts. Again, to nobody's knowledge that I'm aware of it, that has ever happened. Just some interesting pieces that are in the legislation. As we sort of wrap this up here, the thing we're probably known for the most is our transportation work across the state. If you ask most people, what do the regional planning commissions do? They're going to tell you, oh, the 10-year plan. That's actually written into state law, into RSA 228 and RSA 240, that we basically, in a nutshell, will collaborate with the DOT on the 10-year plan priorities, and work with the Governor's Advisory Commission on Intermodal Transportation, or GASIT, on the 10-year plan and the 10-year plan hearings, which just wrapped up to Dave's happiness, probably, 3 or 4 days ago, Dave? And Dave did all the work on that this year for us as the RPC, and did a great job getting the presentations done and attending those hearings. So you're probably, I think most of you that have been around for a while are aware that, one of the roles we have, and I'll talk more about this in the next second half of our presentation, but the RPCs in any area that has more than 50,000 people population, there must be a metropolitan planning organization in place. That's in the federal transportation planning rules. So any urbanized area that has more than 50,000 people, you need to have an MPO under the federal transportation planning laws. And those are cited here under 23 CFR 450. And there's 4 of us in this vote now. It's the National Region, Rockingham, Southern New Hampshire Planning out of Manchester, and the Stratford Regional Planning Commission. All meet the criteria of having that designation and are designated as the MPOs. And really that's where all the transportation work is funded and where it comes from. And again, I'll talk more about that in the specifics of the RPC as we move forward. And then finally, I think this is the last slide in this first half is, you know, what we are is we're designated as political subdivisions of the state. It's really the same designation that a town has. You know, is a public sector, you know, governmental agency. But things that to keep in mind, we're not a nonprofit organization, corporation, any type of political organization, and we cannot lobby. We have no lobbying. We just can't do it. We'll violate our federal funding. So that's a distinction that people need to keep in mind is effectively we're a town without taxation capabilities. It's basically what it is. So, you know, we're governed by the commissioners, and, you know, those commissioners are appointed through the municipalities. And if you should, I assume most of you know how you were appointed, but if you don't, maybe the exception of Portsmouth, which does it slightly differently. What should happen is your planning board should nominate a RPC commissioner and make that recommendation for the select board then to turn around and appoint you as a commissioner. So that process should take place to get you into the seat that you're in at this point. And as I said, we don't have any type of ability to tax. We're supported by the communities through membership dues, which, you know, you voluntarily pay, and, you know, you could, in theory, your community can walk away from it at any point. So, the one thing is that to keep in mind is under RSA 3649 is that, you know, if you don't participate, if you're not a member, then you don't get a vote. Essentially. So if you want to have a voice at the table, and that's really what this, you know, where the value comes in is making sure that your community is part of the regional conversation, because every now and then big things will happen, like housing needs assessments, regional master plans, and opportunities to leverage grant dollars, and you want to be part of that conversation. So I think that wraps this particular section. And I'll pause there to take a quick sip of water and see if anyone has any thoughts on where we came from.
First of all, Tim, can you get us copies of these?
Absolutely. I'll have that one out to you to Friday.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. And Joe Johnson joined us from Stratum. If you want to just say hello, Joe, and introduce yourself.
Hi, Joe.
Hi, everybody. Sorry about that. I completely was thinking it was that start at 7, so sorry about that.
It's always
the best line to use is you had another meeting.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't say that, unfortunately.
Well, I will take partial blame for shifting it on everybody when we normally meet at 7 o'clock. I tried to put it in bold and.
Yeah, no. That was my bad. But yeah, good to see everyone. I am from Stratum. I've lived in Stratum for about 20 years, which is hard to believe, but I'm excited to be part of the commission and to learn more. I'm a civil engineer by day, and so I'm really involved in transportation improvement projects. So excited to be part of the conversation.
Excellent. I have another person in the waiting room that I'm going to let in. It says my Mac. I don't know who that is, so we'll see who it is.
Valerie, you got friends.
I do. You know, cats are curious things.
Whoever my Mac is, can you just introduce yourself?
It's Gwen, Tim. It's Gwen
Oh.
English.
Oh, hi, Gwen.
Sorry I'm late and sorry I'm my Mac.
Not a problem.
Fix that.
That's not a problem. Just glad you're here. And we just went through a presentation called the ABCs of the RPCs, which gives you really the history of where we came from. But I will send that out on Friday. and make sure everybody has it, and you can take a look at that. And what I was going to do now, if there's no questions about the history, is just sort of dive into some more of the specifics with a different set of slides. Oh, Tricia.
I have a quick question. So where you're an abutter, if somebody determines a regional impact.
Mhm.
Now, if the board had a meeting and they determined something was, do they always have to include you as an abutter? Is there any situation? I have one that I know you weren't included. Should you have been? Is there no situation where you shouldn't, if it's determined regional, no matter what, should you be included?
Yeah, if it's determined regional, we're given a butter status. So we should be treated the same as, Epping and all your neighbors around you.
Okay.
Okay, so.
It was I can tell you what it was, and I don't, so it was a motorcycle crossing. They were having a weekend of motorcycle crossings. So it was, notifying all the abutting towns about that. And I know I didn't see you on the list when they had so.
Okay.
They should have been.
It's fine. It's vaguely familiar. I don't remember, but but that's a fair question. But that's the way it's supposed to work. It's it wouldn't be the first time that we weren't notified. Salem really just brushed us off on the Tuscan Village, which is probably the largest regional impact project we've seen in this region in probably more than a decade. So it happens.
David, did you want to add something, David?
No, I don't necessarily have anything to add to that.
Okay.
All right, well, I'll move on if there's no other questions to share my screen for the next set, which is, like I said, is a little bit more about us. It's a little bit shorter, but if I can find the thing here. It doesn't look great. No. Hold on. Of course, I can't find the thing now. All right, let's close this one. Oh, boy. All right. Try again. All right, this time it should work. Here we go. All right. All right, there you go. All right, so a little bit more detail about the RPC. You're probably familiar with the region, but I just figured I'd put the map up there so you can see the extent of it. And this is actually the latest census data with population numbers on each town. So you can see where you're at, and look where if you're above or below a certain threshold. But that's the latest that we got out of the 2020 census. I mean, our region as a whole has gone up to 198,870 people. And Dave, I'm going to throw you on the spot here. In the next 20 years, we're likely to gain another, 1,200 or so folks, which I think would change our MPO designation to a TMA.
Not necessarily.
No, okay.
It has to be. Yeah, that's a complicated question that I maybe don't know the full answer, but theoretically we have to have an urbanized area of over 200,000 people, not just a regional population of over 200,000.
All right.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Anyway, gives you the stats here. We're coming up on 200,000 people for the regional area, 390 square miles. We serve that with 9 staff members and 3 consulting staff who I will introduce you to virtually. I always put the website up here so you can see that and emphasize to everybody, because it will happen all the time. They'll think we're part of the county. We're not. In fact, we don't even cover the entire county because Derry, Chester, who else? Nottingham, Newmarket, Wyndham, and I think Pelham is also part of Rockingham County. So we miss about 10 communities, I think, on that western edge that are actually Rockingham communities. But that goes back to that original presentation, which talked about how we came up with the regions. So it's always fun to get into that with people, but we are the 27 Southeast communities in Rockingham County. There's your staff. So too many people at too many other meetings today, so I couldn't get everybody here. But there's our smiling faces. And I think those of you who have been around for a while know myself, Dave, Scott, and Rob, and Annette, of course, who's been here. I won't say how long Annette's been working for us, but it's been a long time. So the newer employees are in the bottom right here. Christian, who most of you have known, I think Christian's been around for, it's got to be a good 5 years. But our newer hires, Maddie is here coming up on 1 year. We got Maddie as an intern. She's part of our land use team. We had her as an intern back in 2017. She went to the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission for a bit and then came back and joined us because why wouldn't you, right? It's a great place to work. And then Sarah Tartar, who most of you have not met, I don't think any of you have met her yet, started on October 18th and is also part of our land use team and leading our housing effort. So I'm glad that she's here. She's already made a great impact and is making a significant progress on the housing front for us already and getting involved in other projects. So it's been great and it's been good to have her and really good hire. So I'm especially excited about, not to discount my transportation team, but I'm excited about where the land use team is going right now and it's really made for the office to work really well. So it's good news. So what are we anyway? So we talked a lot about what the RPC is from a statutory perspective. And when we went through RSA 36 and talked about all the powers and duties and our role as an advisory organization. But if you corner me in the elevator, this is what I try to tell people. It's, we're a resource, right? First and foremost, we provide you with technical planning services, assistance, to the communities, and make sure that we're doing that role and advising you as you need to be advised and need that assistance. But really, we're a forum too, and you've seen that at the last couple of commission meetings here as we've come out of COVID a little bit, and we've got together a little bit more in person. You've seen that forum, and I noticed a new energy, actually, I think at the last couple of commission meetings where there was a lot more dialogue. I think there's a lot of interest in getting back to discussing some of these things that we've really haven't, we've done well with Zoom, but I think having that in-person conversation, particularly about housing, has been great. And that's what we're here for. We're here to bring you together and make sure that those municipal concerns that cross the boundaries are being discussed and heard. And then, we're here to be that voice of taking, everything that we discuss, to where it needs to go to make sure the legislature and both state and federal agencies understand the region's needs and priorities, and then collectively help pursue funding to make sure that happens. That's really, in a nutshell, that's the way I describe us and who we are. So we have our program areas, and I think a lot of you are familiar with this. Transportation, again, what we're known for. We have, more than half of our budget, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, is funded through federal transportation dollars. We have our land use program and land use team now, which I talked about a few minutes ago. And I hope as part of the materials that I sent out, I sent out one of our new draft services flyers that introduced the land use team and what they bring to the table under Jen's leadership. I'm hoping to get that in front of our planning boards very soon for all the communities, but I want people to understand that, as a member, we're here to help you. And a lot of times, if you have a planning board that doesn't have a planner, or even if you do, if there's something that's complicated that might be out of their area where they're not familiar, just reach out to us. So to think of us as like the bench, right? You have a team, a sports team, a basketball team. you have the guys on the bench that you can pull in anytime. So those towns that have the support, like Portsmouth and Salem, and even, I'm trying to think who else was to go in. Exeter is another great one that has a really strong planning and strong staff. You can still call on us occasionally and use us as needed. And a lot of times, if it's a development review, we can build that right back to the developer. So there's no skin off your back. There's no cost to it. So we can work with you on that. So keep that in mind on the land use side. But, the other programs are, sort of our environment, which I really should rename as resilience. That's really where it fits, is that coastal resilience and energy. I have economic development on here with an asterisk because we're working towards developing more economic development capacity. And then, of course, our GIS and mapping area where Rob and Christian take the lead on that. So,
Tim?
Yeah.
A question I should have asked it just a couple of slides ago. One of the things that you said was that the Planning Commission acts as a voice for informing the legislature and the state and federal agencies about the region's needs and priorities. Can you tell me how exactly does that happen?
Yeah, well, we walk a fine line on not lobbying anybody. All right. So, but the reality of it is that, we have a couple of opportunities. We have a legislative forum we had been having a legislative forum every year up until COVID, where we would get together, invite all the legislators from the region. We'd go typically to Unitil, their corporate office, and have an event essentially where we would pick a topic that has been discussed throughout the year for the commission and present on it to the legislature, and any of the legislators that show up. We often bring in an expert speaker on that topic and have a really good conversation. And it's generally been really well attended and often gets a message to them directly that we don't always have the opportunity to do. And then, occasionally, I think the other area is our legislative subcommittee, Robbie, where who's on there? We have two members on there. Barbara's a longtime legislative committee member, and Beth has been on there as well recently. And what we do there is work to review proposed legislation. And then where appropriate, we just offer technical comments for those pieces of legislation that pertain to municipal interests or regional planning interests. And then,
Okay.
our work with the agencies is ongoing. I mean, we're in constant communication with them on, whether it's DES or DOT or federal agencies, we're in constant communication with them.
Thank you.
You bet. So on the transportation side, I talked earlier in the sort of that legislative side of the presentation about the MPO and the Metropolitan Planning Organization. And really, as I said, we have that designation, and our role is to administer the federal transportation planning process that's laid out in 23 CFR 450. And, we do that, and in doing that, I should say, what's often not understood is that is the avenue through which all federal transportation dollars flow to the region. So if there's any of the projects that are being built with federal dollars, those federal dollars are coming into the region because of the work that Dave and Scott do and Christian on a regular basis to make sure that, that federal administrative process of prioritization is happening, and that we follow the 3C process, which is, having a cooperative, collaborative, what's the other C, Dave? Comprehensive, there it is. A process that's in place that makes sure that, we reach the communities, we reach the interested parties, and make sure their voices are heard and that they have a voice in how that funding is developed. It's really a ground up grassroots process to get transportation projects prioritized, funded, and built. And it
Question?
all happens, it all happens through the RPC and the MPO. Yes, Robbie.
Question, Tim, sorry.
Yeah,
to
that's
interrupt your
okay.
flow here. Now, see, on situations such as the one that we are in right now, say the infrastructure bill passed, right? $1.75 trillion. Now, who would look into it and kind of do an assessment as to what are the different pieces of that pie that we can claim? Okay, and what is the process of doing that? So is there a process for doing that? An analysis of the bill to kind of understand what we can expect?
Yeah.
How we, you know?
I mean, Dave, I'll take a stab at this first, just sort of some listening to some of our peers in the other regional planning commissions and MPOs. I think formally, Robbie, I don't know that there's a process per se, but I think the staff, like working with Dave and some of the other RPCs, are going to begin to unpack what's in there and where the opportunities are for the state and for the region, and then work collaboratively with the DOT to try to take advantage of that. We have a good relationship with DOT, although we have to really speak up to have our voices heard in that situation. So Dave, I don't know if you know any more about how that's going to unpack or what. It's pretty new and pretty fresh. So I think we got a lot of work to do to dig into it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my understanding is that all the transportation dollars will, of course, flow through the Department of Transportation. They've talked about during the 10-year plan hearings, their plans for what they want to do with that funding, which is largely put it towards making sure the roads are paved, bridges are new, and trying to advance some projects that have been languishing, that kind of thing, kind of, fully funding projects that are partially funded, that kind of thing. But long term, I don't know that they really have a plan for what they want to do with it. And it's probably up to us to speak up and say, here's where you could spend some of this money. But I haven't had a chance yet to really look through in any sort of detail. I've seen a couple of summaries of what the bill is about and what's in it. But yeah, that's a good point that we need to start digging into that to see where there's an opportunity for our communities to bring some of these dollars locally.
And if you don't mind, I would like to ask a two-part follow-up question, Tim.
Go for it.
Okay, the questions are that, there are dollars in the infrastructure beyond transportation. Okay, so I think that that we need to grab that. And my second part of that is that it is some non-trivial amount of work to be done to dig through all of that to understand what each community can get out of this. And if that is the type of work that is undertaken at the RPC level, then, there may be a need for you to be funded by the constituent communities so that each community can get an idea of how they can benefit by this.
Yeah, you're spot on there, Robbie. And this isn't really any different than the ARPA money that the COVID relief money is a similar type of thing where, we've been trying to dig into that as best we can and help communities navigate and leverage those dollars. And, it's really come down to, a lot of hurry up and wait on that side of it. But I think you're right on the infrastructure side as well. It's not a non-trivial amount of work, and we don't really have a lot of capacity to do it. That's why I think it's going to be at least on the transportation side, a collaborative effort of the 4 MPOs, the staff of the 4 MPOs, to look into that collaboratively and work together, because I don't think any one person or staff could do it at this point. But it's a need, and I appreciate the fact that you see the need to support that. And that's where we could use some more thinking along those lines.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think any of the communities taken individually have the horsepower or wherewithal to be able to do this kind of analysis. And as such, you are saying you are collaborating with the other RPCs to look at it. And I think that that makes sense. So definitely it should be done at that level. And the community should learn from your analysis as to how we could benefit from it. So,
Good point. No, it's a great point. So,
thank you.
all right. Any other comments? I'll continue on. We could have done a whole evening on transportation planning, by the way. And so this is very high level and just an overview. But, you know, I just wanted to mention the technical advisory committee as part of this overall MPO process, because all that work and the prioritization that's done by the staff is done in conjunction with the technical advisory committee, which is made up of member communities, as well as the DOT and the transit agencies and New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, Federal Highway and others that participate on that. But it's, again, volunteers from the communities. Oftentimes it's the staff of the community that will participate in this, because it does get into a more technical level of discussion. But so all of my point of bringing this up is all throughout the transportation planning process, from, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, where you all as commissioners serve as Metropolitan Planning Organization members. All of this work is heard through the Technical Advisory Committee, which is another level of vetting at your local level by your staff members or other volunteers. And that group will be making recommendations to the Metropolitan Planning Organization as a whole. So it's a really good process for getting collaboration. I just noticed in the chat that Tricia pointed out that the master plan should be looked at as a need for infrastructure. Getting your master plan funded, I think, is what you're referring to there, but it's a good point. So I think I've more or less killed this in terms of what I wanted to hit on talking points. The prioritization of the projects in the region, and then our cooperation with the DOT is also part of the transportation planning world. So on the land use side, there's a lot we do on land use, and I just wanted to put this slide up because it's one I like. It was used in some other presentations just to show what the intent was of regional planning, and that was to sort of fall between the local master plan and the state development plan and bridge that gap. That's sort of the point of this diagram, is to show that overlap. The state development plan, however, hasn't been updated in more than a decade, and that's unfortunate. I think Jen Sizz, who is the director at Stratford Regional Planning Commission, was the last person to update the state development plan when she worked for the Office of Energy and Planning more than 10 years ago. It's probably 15 years ago at this point. And our hope, I know the governor is aware of that. Our hope is that some new resources, now that this planning staff has again been moved into the Office of Planning and Development, I'm hoping that the state development plan will get a little bit more attention, and that they'll work with us at the regional level to sort of make sure that that is done in a strong way, which I think will bring an overall, more comprehensive approach to New Hampshire in terms of planning. But besides this very high level, I think a lot of you are aware, we have our staff is here to work with you, work with the planning boards, work with zoning, conservation. We can assist with everything from a CIP to a master plan, ordinance writing. We do model ordinances. Really, again, the thing to keep in mind is that the staff is here to help the communities and be there for you. So the key is to remember is, as an advisory organization, I can't walk into Raymond and tell you how to write your master plan, or to Northampton and tell you how to write your master plan. I needed to come up to us in a way, communicate it to us where you're looking for that assistance, and then we can work out how we get it done. But the land use is like I said, it's a huge part. And I invite you to look at the flyer, the services flyer that I sent out with the email, so you can see a little bit more about what's available to you and what we can do under a contract basis.
Tim, I think Richard has a question or a comment.
Good.
I wasn't sure if you were done, Tim.
Yeah.
Something very important that I'm not sure if it was yourself, Tim, or David, or Scott, or however it came to surface. The commissioners, the staff, if I can say this properly, has a tendency to not say no to anybody that asks them a question. A lot of time was being eluded, not even used, because they weren't spending the time on the projects that they were doing. They would always say, sure, okay, fine, I'll take care of that. And then something was put back in the back burner. Bob Prine could be a typical example, or maybe even Christian for that matter.
Yeah, that's been a challenge, Richard, over the years. It just, managing the staff and managing the expectations of the communities. There's a balance there, and they really want to help, and they really want to do everything they can to help the communities. I think nobody's in this organization to get rich, and they're here because
they're going to bounce it off somebody.
Yeah.
Before they go ahead and do whatever they wanted to do.
Yeah, no, I think they're getting better. I think when I took this job, Richard, I think I told the analysis I gave to the executive committee and personnel committee was that initially when I started, it's like a Viking ship, but not everybody was rowing at the same tempo or speed. Right. And a couple of people may have dropped the oars altogether, right? So I think we've gotten into a much better place. And so to have that, using that same analogy, I think people are really rowing in the same direction at this point. And like I said, I'm really happy with the way the staff is sort of gelling and coming together in the last 6 months with a lot of changes that have happened since I've been here. I mean, we've had 3 significant changes in staffing. So
most of them good so far.
Yeah. So anyway, I'll continue on, and this slide I left in here, but it just shows you the range of all the things I was talking about before, everything that we try to do. And, we have to manage that, and we got to manage it so that we make sure the projects get done and still manage the needs and expectations of the communities. Our GIS services, I just wanted to give them a plug. That's really been a support function at the RPC, support to the land use team, support to the transportation team as a whole. In the last couple of years, we've been able to do a little bit more marketing of services, where we started to do some tax map work. We just brought the Northampton tax maps online to give them an electronic system that they can now access all of their tax mapping online on the web, accessible to the staff and to others in the public. So that's a great advantage to them. Did the same for Stratum, and we're working to expand more of what we do. We're doing a build out analysis now for Kensington, and those services are there, and we usually contract for them. We don't have a lot of capacity to do these at the cost of dues, but they're there. And quite frankly, we got a couple of really good GIS analysts, and take advantage of them as a community if you can. My feeling is that the investment that RPC has made into GIS should negate the need for any of the communities to make any real significant investment into the software themselves. We can probably, especially the smaller communities, we can more than likely cover everything you need here. If you want to work with us, it'd be a lot cheaper to work with us than to buy the software and hire a professional to do that work. And so there's real value here if communities want to try to take advantage of it. So I'm going to jump into, now that I sort of went over the programs, I'm going to jump into funding. I just saw Leanne, is your hand raised?
Yeah, Tim, quick question. How do the GIS services in terms of the tax map
work that you're doing for the town you mentioned, how does that differ from the Access GIS mapping, or is RPC just a different vendor than, say, the other vendors out there?
Yeah, we basically jumped into the vendor world, is what we did, is we, there's, I don't know, CAI Associates or something like that's a big one that does a lot of the tax mapping and GIS systems like that.
Yeah,
And
okay.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
makes
and
sense.
we realized that we could do a comparable product at a cheaper cost.
Yeah,
And, you know,
that
it-
totally
we-
makes sense.
and then we can support it. And what it does then, is part of the approach here is that if you worked with us on it, and you know, it gives you a comparable product, and then it gives you a sort of a foot in the door for you to work with us more on GIS, and vice versa. It's like it gives us more of a connection. So, you know, if Fremont were ever interested, absolutely, you know, you can just reach out to Rob and we can talk about, you know, working with you on that or not. It's really up to you, but it's a service that's out there, and we'll be putting together a similar flyer to that land use one that I put out to show what we can do and what's available to everyone for GIS services.
That would be excellent, because inevitably there's sharing, you know, CAI, which is the vendor Fremont uses, and
Yep.
you know, we have to get data from RPC, and it would just make sense to keep it under one roof. So thank you for answering.
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to jump into funding, and the numbers I have up here and all the slices of the pie here are just generic examples. They're not current budget. This might even be from 2019. But I just wanted to give you a sense of where the sources come from, what the revenue sources are for the organization. Member dues is typically runs in that $160,000 range currently. You know, makes up about, you know, anywhere from 11 to 14% of the budget, depending on what year we're in. Local contracts, these are contracts that we would do, like those GIS contracts we were just talking about, or a local master plan contract, or you name it, anything that we directly contract with the communities for fall into this bucket. And that's typically running in that $200,000 to $250,000 range on a typical budget year. Transportation, as you can see by the pie chart, makes up on average 50% of our budget. To the tune of about $500,000 a year to upwards of 600,000 a year, depending on what's going on. But that's, again, we're known for that. That's the lion's share of where our dollars are. Then we have a bunch of other federal grants. Most of these right now come through National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, which are passed through New Hampshire DES for coastal work, more than likely, or sometimes it's source water or water protection work through the DES. And I'll just wrap up just this last part here. And then our state funding, our very cherished $11,111 that we get from the state to basically run the organization and do that. That's the funding that's really targeted towards, it could be used for the housing needs assessment or the regional master plan. Instead, what we try to do is do all of the mapping that you see on our website. We try to get those updated, and we try to do other technical assistance projects for communities when they come up that we can't otherwise fund. But on a typical budget year is anywhere from 1 to 1.25 million on any given year. I see two hands. I didn't see which one went up first. Maybe Leanne, yours was just up there, and Robbie raised his.
Robbie's next.
Yeah, so this transportation funding, that's the DOT?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a part of a federal funding.
Yes, it comes from both the Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Transit Administration in what they call a unified planning grant.
Right.
Okay.
And then the federal funding line is more DES, you said, right?
That's mostly DES. You know, could be other sources, could be EPA if we were doing brownfields. But you know, it it's the DES, when I say that's the state agency, it's often funded through NOAA or one of the federal agencies that pass it through the state organization to us.
Okay, and in the local contracts, the number that you are showing around 225, that's how many contracts make that up, make the kind of money?
Ooh, good question. I don't have my budget in front of me, but it'll vary. I mean, there's, a half a dozen towns where we circuit ride, and we've got probably 3 or 4 master plans going now. So I'm going to just ballpark it and say that can be anywhere from 10 to 15 or so on a typical year. It might be a few more than that.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Any other questions about where the dollars come from? All right, we'll move forward then. The dues. This is a favorite subject here, right? So we rely on dues pretty heavily. And again, this is just data that was from a past year. I think it's fiscal 19 is what this was from. But so you understand how we currently assess dues. It's $1 per capita for the first 10,000 population, 50 cents per capita for the second 10,000 population, and then 25 cents per capita for the third remaining portion of the population. And I think we just finally hit that with Salem going over 30,000 people in the last census. But that's how we assess the dues right now. We've had a number of conversations recently at the executive committee about this. Is this the best way to do it? Could we do it another way? We came around to saying that, we're never going to save the organization or make us fiscally sound on the backs of you all. And that this is probably the best way to approach it. The one change we've made recently was to agree that we believe that we should index that $1 per capita to inflation, because otherwise it just becomes stagnant and we don't make progress with the cost of inflation. So we're looking at that for fiscal 2024 as a change to how we do this. But where the dues goes, I'll go into next. And Ravi, unless you have another question, you would be good.
Yeah, sorry to ask so many questions. I just wanted to ask if this kind of a dues schedule the same for other planning commissions as well, or is it unique to RPC?
I think we're all a little different.
I see.
I can tell you the National Regional Planning Commission, what they do is they decide that they need, say, $170,000 to meet the needs under local dues. And then what they do is they take the population of each community and figure out what percent population each community makes up of the overall region. And then they look at the equalized assessed value of the community and figure out what percentage equalized assessed value is of each community in the region. And they weight those 50-50. And then they use that percentage and distribute the dues across the region that way. So it considers population equalized assessed value. I've looked at that here, and one of the challenges that we've tried to deal with dues is balancing out the tiny communities versus the large communities. To look at I'll pick on Newington, since Newington's here with Dennis, paying basically $800 a year versus Salem's, well, Salem right now is paying close to 20,000. That number is that's a whole other story what's in there. I'll pick on Portsmouth since Beth is here. Portsmouth paying, 15,000 versus Newington's 800. Is this really an equitable distribution of dues? You could argue it's not, but again, we're not going to save the organization by trying to balance it out. And when I did try to apply that Nashua model, Portsmouth's dues went up significantly because of that population equalized assessed value, whereas while Newington's doubled, it still wasn't a significant contribution to the overall dues. So we've been looking at it. We haven't really found a better model. And so where do they go, right? So once we collect that $160,000 in dues, about half of it goes right out to match those federal transportation dollars, as well as some of those other federal dollars. So we use about half of it to leverage, more than $500,000 in federal funding to do the work that we do. So if you look at it that way, those, we take 80,000 and turn it into 700,000, right? That's one way to sort of pitch it and sell it. And then the rest of it, the remaining roughly half, what I try to do with it is make sure that that we can answer those questions that Richard was alluding to. Like, we don't like to say no, right? Well, we're going to say yes, we got to pay for that somehow. And the staff has the, the authority to work with individual communities or a group of communities using that remaining $70,000 or so towards, needs that are there. And, so what we try to do is target things like model ordinances that will benefit multiple communities. We did an electricity aggregation where we pooled together a bunch of communities to purchase electricity on the open market to save the communities money. Those types of programs that we can do with those regional dues. And, full open candor, we don't have a huge reserve at RPC. We have roughly $30,000 in reserve at any given time right now. The only way that ever gets larger is if we don't spend all the dues, or if we do fixed cost contracts where we are efficient and we make a small profit. More often than not, our contracts are set up as reimbursements. So we have to do the work to get the money. So we're basically, as much as we are a governmental sort of organization, it's also a business, but it's a business that isn't really easily sustained as more like a nonprofit, right? We don't have the ability to really make money. So we sort of walk on that edge, and my goal is to try and get our reserve up to, 3 months of operating expenses, which would be about $250,000 or $70,000 or $80,000 a month of operating costs. So that's what we're aiming for. We haven't quite gotten there yet, but it's been going up slowly. Dennis.
Yeah, question for you. I thought you had mentioned some time ago, a few months back, that you were trying to go for, I don't know what kind of authority would be, but something that would allow you to take donations.
Yeah, we're in the process, and I didn't include that in this presentation. Thanks for bringing it up. I forgot about that. We are in the process of establishing a partner 501c3 that sort of will, if you think about it, it would sit in parallel to the RPC, with the primary purpose of being able to access foundation grants that aren't otherwise accessible to political subdivisions in governmental organizations. A great example of that is, and we'll talk about it at the end of this, is the Tufts age-friendly community grant that we were fortunate enough to get, but we had to go out and find a partner 501c3 to work with to pursue that funding. Having the 501 sort of in-house, if you will make that a lot easier for us to pursue, where we can access and apply for those grants through a 501c3 that's, essentially a partner organization. So anyway, that's sort of the rundown on dues. I want to make sure everyone's comfortable, you understand where it goes, so that, when communities ask, they understand that we're not, a lot of it is matching grants, and then other is just regional services and what we're trying to make sure that we provide to the communities. Go ahead, Ravi.
Clearly, RPC does a lot to do with the transportation. Is it an artifact of the fact that the money is coming from more transportation, DOT? And the reason I'm asking the question is that if there were other funding sources with the other areas of planning thrust, would your focus be more diversified than being just specifically so heavily on transportation?
Yeah, yeah, it would. And I guess an example of that is those RPCs that have economic development districts that get probably a little bit more funding from the Economic Development Administration than they do from the DOT. Stratford Regional Planning is a perfect example of that. Up in Dover, Rochester rather. They get funding from the EDA. They're an economic development district. They do things like run what's called the Seacoast Economic Development Stakeholders Group with that funding, and has put them really on the map on that, in that conversation where they've done really well. We participate, but they're the ones who have the funding to lead that type of effort. In our region, it's the REDC. There is a Regional Economic Development Corporation out of Raymond that does that work. So we're not going to be an economic development district, but to your point, if there was let's just say a more funding through NOAA for coastal resilience, that could potentially change that conversation a little bit as to how we're perceived and what we do.
So the follow-on is that is the fact that we have so much reliance on DOT because sometimes you find things where you look, but if there are other places that could be funding sources, and perhaps that we are not getting the money because we are not looking there, and perhaps we don't have the resources to go look there. And so, it's a matter of, allocating some resources to buy the seed stock so you can actually have, I'm just wondering if something along those lines may have to be thought about, because there could be potentially a larger benefit back to the constituent communities if there could be, more work beyond transportation.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I've often said that, we don't even need to have the majority of the funds to be something other than transportation. That'd be great if we could. But even if I've always said if we had another $150,000 to $200,000, we'd be doing a lot more on the regional master plan and the housing needs assessment. And when I say a lot more, what happens is it's been this sort of every 5 years, right? Where we make a splash and we go away, and then we come back and we'll make another splash and we go away. With that steadier funding, and it's not a lot. It's, like I said, it's $150,000, $200,000 to get another staff person in here, where we can have a steady presence on those topics, where a continuous presence, and be there on a regular basis, continuously talking about those needs and those planning issues, as opposed to these big updates and then nothing, and then another big update. So there's opportunity there. I mean, some of the sources that might be out there, the county, it's like, we've had some initial conversations about that. And then it's a matter of seeking out other potential funding. So I mean, the state could do a lot more than $11,000 if we had the political will to put more than $11,000. And I think, $1.5 million to all the RPCs, giving everyone, a little over 100,000 would go a long way towards what you're suggesting.
Hold on.
Yeah, I think that I wasn't really looking so much for even state funding. I'm just thinking that if the constituents believe for $1 worth of contributions they make to RPC, they are getting X times that back in terms of benefits, then I think that, so I think that somehow maybe that is established, maybe that people understand that, but I'm just saying, being new, I'm just wondering,
Yeah, I don't know that it's very well understood or appreciated or valued, and that's an area where we have to continue to work. And that's where, you know, commissioners come in, and really what I ask of you all is to help, you know, help me, you know, communicate that. And if you need my help to help communicate that, let's work together to communicate that, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
I will move onward. So anyway, we're coming sort of to the end of this, but you know, this is sort of what I stole this from Cliff, from our former director, who used the same slide. It's basically the towns with the most active commissioners tend to gain the most from the commission. And it tends to be true. Those that are, you know, are here, that are present, we have that relationship and we're able to help, and the communication is there. So this is where you guys come in, and really what it's all about in being a commissioner. And it's these three things. It's a role of advocacy and communication, right? It's making sure that, you know, your voice, your community's voice is heard. You're advocating for your community communicating back to the town what's going on at the regional level and where those opportunities are. And it's serving in a liaison role. And I mean, everything you're saying, Ravi, in those questions, I think you see exactly how this all fits together. And you know, that's really what we ask. And this is the simplest way I could put it for all of our commissioners and our, you know, new commissioners as well, as you're coming on board. It's really not difficult. It's not a difficult concept, but it can be a difficult challenge. And some of the things that I, you know, have to ask of you is know your select board, get to know them, establish a relationship. You know, if you're not already on the planning board, which a lot of you are, or your conservation commission, get to know who the planning board is and establish some sort of regular communication with them if you can.
Go to some meetings.
Go to some meetings, send them an email saying, hey, this is what's going on at the RPC. They're talking about housing. I know for a fact Tricia did that, and then brought a couple of select board members to the meeting last month, which was great. And we had some really good conversation about the different views of housing in Raymond versus housing in Portsmouth. And that's the type of stuff that needs to happen. So I get to give Tricia an A+ on her role as a commissioner right out of the gate, because it's exactly what we need to happen.
She had a note on the chat line. Did you read that, Tim?
I can.
And you guys came and talked to Seabrook Board of Selectmen a couple of times.
Yep.
In the last few months.
Yep, we're getting back out there now that we can. So yeah, we're on different projects. We're getting out there, so it's important to help everyone understand that role. I think this slide really sums it up. And I noticed Tricia just said self-sustaining agriculture, history of the state capitalizing on tourism as an example of, I think, what we were just talking about, right?
Yeah, those are all the different areas beyond transportation where we could do more.
Yeah. Great. So the other thing I would recommend is part of this is know your technical advisory committee member. If you, as I talked about in the MPO, if you don't know who your TAC member is, come find out, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. In fact, we need to do some recruiting on that, which I think I have in an upcoming slide. Is we definitely need more participation at that. So let me get ahead of myself here. But so our meetings, this is what we do right now officially is up to 10 per year, 4 regular meetings, typically 4 MPO-ish meetings. You know, we have our legislative forum, which is usually in November, which we're kicking down the road again to let the COVID thing hopefully get further into the rear view. We have our annual meeting, which has typically been a dinner and a speaker in the June of each year. And then we take December off and either July or August, depending on when I take vacation typically. But that's typically how that goes.
You slid that under the door.
That's how it works. So
take a note, David.
And we would tend, in the pre-COVID days, we would go around the region. We'd come out to, we'd go out to Salem, we'd be over in Portsmouth, we go to Raymond, come back into Exeter and move those meetings around to try to share that driving. in the COVID days, we were just doing the Zoom thing, which worked well as well. So, but we try to get the materials out to you in advance, as you've probably already noticed, and try to do all of this now electronically as opposed to mail. But before I leave that slide, what we're talking about, and we were chatting a little bit before the meeting, was we need to look at maybe doing this a little differently. What I was suggesting at executive committee last month is that we might move this to about 6 or so meetings per year, which would be, 4 sort of quarterly meetings for the RPC and the MPO, and then a couple of events where we would have maybe a legislative forum and a local officials forum. It might be 7 if we continue to do an annual meeting in the format that we do. So trying to sort of get this to be a little bit more consolidated, recognizing the strain that people have. I mean, Ravi said at the beginning, he can't believe how much is done by volunteers. And that pool of volunteers is pretty small. And we've got to be careful that we don't burn people out, while at the same time not losing touch with our team and our folks that are volunteering. So officially, this is where we're at. We're looking at some different options for the coming year as to what we might do.
Tim,
So-
I would put in this one recommendation that that Zoom meetings, even when we don't have COVID restrictions, is an easy way. When we have a good, pithy, compact agenda, 60 minutes or less, and we could come in and still be in touch and be engaged, and not really make a huge dent on our schedule. I mean, that could be an option that could always be considered.
Absolutely. And one of the ways we might, I said to not lose touch with everybody, if we did reduce the number of official meetings, one way to do this would be to have topical webinars where the staff are just presenting on the projects that they're working on periodically to keep everybody informed as to what's going on inside the building at 156 Water Street. So, Jen Rowden could come in and present on some source water protection, and certainly Sarah could do the housing, and Maddie working on coastal resilience now. We could definitely supplement and have webinars available to attend in person and have them recorded. So I think we can do it. And the trick with meeting on Zoom is still that pesky 91A, that we have to have a quorum present in the physical location. So we can't really meet, but there's no reason we couldn't do webinars to share information and keep people involved, and come if you want. If not, watch the recording. So that's the best way around that. So a little more about just being involved, staying informed. Our Commissioner Handbook is out there on the website. I want to thank Barbara and Amy, who no longer works for us, for getting this rendition of it up there. It should be useful to you, and the link is here. You'll have this on Friday, and you can always go search it out on the website. But it gives a good, much probably abbreviated overview of me rambling on for up to an hour and a half now on this. So, and it gives you a good sense of what's out there. The other way to be involved is our subcommittees. We have executive committee. We have 3 openings right now, maybe 4 with Mike McAndrew moving on. And we meet on the 4th Wednesday of the month at 4:30 p.m. It's a lot of times people are hesitant to be a new commissioner and jump into the executive committee, but it's allowed. And if you're thinking about it, you're interested, don't hesitate to throw your name in the hat, because we definitely have, we're getting down there in membership at this point and need to boost that up.
But it's also a fresh voice.
It is a fresh voice. And you get into the details of the budget and these discussions of how we should run the meeting, and what's going on inside the doors of the building operationally with me and the staff. And it's really that executive board of directors type of approach. So it's great. We'd love to have people join in if they're interested. The development of regional impact, we talked about that earlier tonight. There's a couple openings there. I believe our legislative committee can always fit in an additional person, although it's filled out. All of these committees are listed in the handbook, and if you're interested in any one of them, please go look and reach out to me. We'd be glad to help you out. But our technical advisory committee through the MPO is definitely an area where we could use some help. And you know, I know if Dave, if you want to say a few words, we're working on our approach to nominating technical advisory committee members, where we'd like to mirror the RPC approach of having the planning board make a recommendation in some cases, especially in those smaller communities. And that's something we're writing up and we'll distribute hopefully in the very near future to get that clarified, but we will be looking for members as well. Dave, I don't know what we have for membership right now, if you know off the top of your head.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't know, but we've had a lot of sort of turnover in recent months, maybe the last year or so. A lot of people who've, you know, used to work for a community have moved on, retired, done, you know, whatever that, you know, so we're a little lower than we like to be, for sure. Love to have everybody participate, of course, but you know, our usual crew of, you know, 10 or 12 communities that participate has sort of dwindled down to about 6 that are pretty regular at this point. So we have to bolster that back up.
Yeah, we had a concern about having a quorum.
It's an issue. Yeah, it's an issue for sure. You know, we've taken some steps at the office to help that. And there's still a lot of COVID hesitancy out there and coming back together. You know, but we've got the back room set up now for virtual hybrid meetings, the conference room. And, you know, we got a good size air filter going back there. And, you know, we had executive committee there, I think last month, where we did a hybrid style meeting and it worked out pretty well. So if we can keep the numbers of people down, at least through the winter, maybe, and then hopefully, you know, we're moving on from that, but we can use that investment that we've made and, you know, try to get some more people together.
Yeah.
So anyway, so yeah, just getting involved. I mean, you know, if you don't get our newsletter, please reach out to me. I want to make sure you get that. That goes out monthly. Our social media accounts are updated on a fairly regular basis. And then, like I said, the real thing is that slide of being, you know, an advocate and staying in touch with the community, knowing who the decision makers are there and communicating with them.
Who does the social media, Jim?
Jen is doing it right now, Jen Rowden.
Oh, just her? I thought.
Yeah, mostly. I still need it. We still need the great need of having an administrative assistant up front to help out with that, but we still haven't found a candidate. So
thank you.
It's a tough hiring market. So last slide, bunch of words. I just wanted to throw out there some of the things that we're working on, just put them in front of your eyes. But, you know, we've got the big thing we've talked about a couple of times, housing needs assessment this year, the age-friendly initiative that Scott's leading. We've got at least 4 different master plan updates going right now, potentially more in the near future. We're proactively reviewing master plans in communities that haven't done an update. I've got Jill Longvell, one of our planning consultants, going through town by town and writing up a review of, hey, here's what you might want to think about updating. Here's what's out of date. Here's how we can help you, and pushing that out to those communities and presenting to them if they ask. Lots of great stuff on the coastal resilience side. One of the areas that I wanted to point out was our Flood Smart Seacoast project, where we're going to be helping the town of Hampton establish a process for those property owners that, if you were paying attention this past week, where, you know, front doors were flooded because of just the high tide, the king tide. And we're going to be working on a process to help them in the town work through FEMA to have those houses either elevated or bought out and taken. So interesting stuff. Leanne, your hand went up.
Yeah, Tim, call it a shameless plug, but you know, the county is run quite a bit on volunteers, and folks should take the opportunity to utilize RPC at the very low rates to help us with the things that need to be done. I can't tell you how many things we've done, and volunteers want to save money, but it takes so long to do things when you can hire the professionals at a very reasonable price. So just wanted to plug that.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And Fremont in particular has done a really good job with their master plan, working directly with Jen Rowden and now Maddie a little bit as well, where they just dropped it, 5,000 to 6,000 a year and updated chapter by chapter. And it's getting to the point where it's almost done. I think it's almost fully updated. So that's a great approach. So anyway, I'll just close it out with the opportunities that are coming up this year that are still out there despite all the work that we have. We've got a source water protection grant that looks very likely that we're going to get, which will help communities write and update their ordinances to be consistent with the data that's out there and the mapping that's out there. Working on economic development opportunities for the Seacoast Greenway in particular. Scott's been doing a lot of work on that rail trail, and we're pursuing some potential funding through the Economic Development Administration to promote that project in the travel and tourism side. We're doing grant writing soon with the Community Development Block Grant through CDFA. So if your community has underserved populations where you're looking to, assist those areas, the CDFA has those grants, and we are training a person, Joe Longbell, to do that type of writing and offer it as a service to communities. And then there's a couple of different, the regional plan that I mentioned earlier, our regional master plan. There may be additional HUD money coming in the near future to update that. And we've got some open space and natural resource inventory opportunities out there in the near future. So we got a lot going on. Too much to really go into at this, as the hour is getting a little late. So with that, I think that's what I had for slides, and that's the end. Yeah.
I would like to see the analysis of the infrastructure bill as one of the projects added there. It's good to mine for some money in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I have pretty high confidence that this is going to be a collaborative effort. It isn't formally established yet, Ravi, but it's something that we'll take back, particularly after hearing your comments here.
Thanks.
Yeah. And that's really what I had. Did anyone else have any questions, comments?
It's after 9 o'clock.
Was it helpful? That's all.
Very helpful to me. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope it was. And I'll reach out if you have any questions anytime, guys. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Just email us a copy, Tim.
Yeah, you'll get both of them by Friday.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Tim, it was very good.
Have a
Thank you.
nice night.
Thanks,
Really
guys.
appreciate it.
Have a nice
Bye-bye.
holiday.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye, guys and gals.